How many of you can relate to this? You walk from your living room to your home office, but now you're standing in the middle of the room looking around. What the heck was it you came in here for? You rack your brain, still nothing. So you decide to retrace your steps back to the living room. No apparent clues here. And while you can't quite remember what it was that sent you to your office in the first place, you do seem to remember that it seemed important. What's going on here? Are these warning signs of the early ages of dementia? Or does our memory just start to diminish as we age? Today's guest says that while memory loss as we age is common, it is not normal. Hello and welcome to the Over 50 Health and Wellness Show. I'm your host, Kevin English. I'm the founder of the Silver Edge, and our mission is to help you get into the best shape of your life, no matter your age, so you can show up in the second half of your life as the healthiest, strongest, most vital version of yourself. We have a great show for you today. Francine Waskavitz is here, and she's going to help us improve our memory health. But before we get to that, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Energy Bits. Energy Bits makes the purest chlorella and spirulina available on the market. If you don't know, chlorella and spirulina are two of the most nutrient-rich foods found on the planet. I personally take their spirulina every morning for its antioxidants, its omega-3s, and the over 40 vitamins and minerals to help improve my energy and focus. And I take their chlorella every evening for its super high chlorophyll and vitamins and minerals to help with immune function, recovery, and gut health. I recommend starting out with their Vitality Bits. This is their 50-50 blend of spirulina and chlorella. Anyway, if you want to learn more, head over to silveredgepartners.com and click on the Energy Bits icon. And because you're a listener of this podcast, you can save 20% off your purchase when you use coupon code SILVEREDGE at checkout. Again, that's silveredgepartners.com and use coupon code SILVEREDGE, that's Silver Edge all run together, at checkout to save 20%. Okay, enough of that. Let's get on with today's show. My guest today is Francine Waskavitz. Francine is a speech-language pathologist, an integrative health and nutrition coach, and a memory health coach who specializes in helping people build better, stronger, more resilient minds and memory. Join us today as Francine shares with us her top tips on improving our memory health. Without further ado, let's meet Francine.
So really, as a speech and language pathologist, I've been a memory therapist for the last decade. I don't think that people always associate speech therapy with memory health, but the two are highly tied together. So if somebody's experiencing cognitive changes, difficulty with their memory, with problem solving, and they see their physician, they may order speech therapy to do therapy to improve that. So I've really been in this space for the last 10 years. And in the last 2 years or so, I started to feel really out of alignment with what I was doing in my work. I saw a huge gap in the system when it came to memory health. It felt like nobody really shows you how to care for your memory. And then once it's a problem, we can do therapy from sun up until sundown. But if you're not taking care of your memory in the other ways, the lifestyle aspect, if you go home and you're sedentary or your nutrition isn't where it should be, then all of the memory strategies and exercises that we're doing in therapy really aren't going to carry over. So I had this little thought and this little seed planted in my mind that I knew I could be doing more for people. And that was what led me to go back to school. That was why I went to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, to really put what I was learning on my own through all my own research and reading into practice, and to be able to merge my background in memory health and therapy and strategies with the lifestyle components to sustain and build a healthy memory.
Wow. Okay. So you said a lot there, and I want to unpack all of that. I'm especially fascinated by the lifestyle pieces of this. But before we dive into all of that, let's back up a little bit because the very first thing you said was a little surprising to me, and that was this linkage between our language and problems with language and memory. Can you talk a little bit more about that, what and why that would be, and how that might show up?
Sure. So it's intricately connected, right? The way that our brain works and the way that we're thinking and our memory can impact our communication. That's really why it falls into the lap of a speech and language pathologist is we take a lot of neuro classes and really, you know, cognition precedes communication. So if
Right.
we're not thinking clearly, we can't express ourselves clearly, we may stumble over our words, or we may have difficulty with word finding, and they're all intricately linked together. And a lot of people, as they age, they'll start to say things about their communication itself. I have a lot of clients that will come to me and say, word finding has become an issue out of
Hmm.
nowhere. I've always been well spoken, and now they get stuck on the tip of my tongue. It's a very common experience for people as they get older.
Yeah, and I think as you're saying that, I'm smiling here. Folks on the podcast can't see, but I can relate to that story, right? I've had that exact same experience where I know what I want to say, but that word just won't come to me. And that's probably at age 58. That's kind of a recent phenomenon for me. All right. So before we start unpacking some of this lifestyle stuff, talk to us. Let's put some parameters around this. What is memory health?
Memory health is really a system. It's an ecosystem, right? Because memory health is brain health, and brain health is so many things. I'm sure, as you know, there are so many components that go into supporting clear thinking and, a solid memory, a vibrant mind, a sharp mind as you get older. So, those components are nutrition and exercise, your sleep, your stress levels, even your gut health plays a role in your memory health and being able to, take information in and store it and recall it and communicate it later. So it's really an ecosystem supporting a process.
An ecosystem supporting a process. I love that. And you said, how did you say it? That memory health really starts with brain health, right?
It does.
And right out of the gate, you mentioned four things that we talk about all the time on this show. You mentioned nutrition, you mentioned movement, you mentioned, I think, maybe sleep and stress support. So I do want to go there, but again, let's back up a little bit. I want to talk about just memory loss. And before we started recording, you and I were talking about, I walked in the room and I couldn't remember what I walked in there for. And that's a pretty common phenomenon. I don't remember that as a younger person, but it kind of happens fairly frequently now. What's going on? Why does our memory begin to slip, for lack of a better word, as we start to get older?
Sure. So as you're getting older, there's a lot of changes physiologically that are happening, right? So blood flow changes to the brain. And as you get older, you know how maybe a muscle can atrophy. It's that whole use it or lose it. The same thing is happening with your brain. So there's two periods, and these have been studied in life. There are two periods where you see this stagnation in brain health. And one of them is after you graduate college, and that new learning for a lot of people just stops. Suddenly
Yeah.
you've gone from taking in all this information and acting on it to, okay, now I'm in this rhythm and this routine. And then also after retirement is the next one, is
Mm.
that, the demands on your energy and the demands on your thinking each day completely change. And so there's just a shift, and that shift can actually shift the function. And then when functionality changes, a lot of the time, so does our response to it. And so that can also play a role in what happens with our memory. The other big component, especially with age, that changes is focus. So, when it comes to memory, in order to actually make something a memory, you must first attend to it. And this is where you'll hear people say, "I walked into a room and I couldn't remember what I came in there for." Well, it was likely that when you sat down in the chair before you got up to move to the other room, you didn't fully take a moment to take in exactly what it is you were going to look for. You were maybe thinking of 12 other things at the same
Hmm.
time, and that impact on your focus can impact your recall.
That certainly makes sense. So lots going on there. Now, how normal is this, or how common, I should say, is this for folks as they age? All my audience is going to be over 50. How common is this kind of memory lapse as we get older?
So I'm really careful when I talk about this part. There are typical changes that occur with age that can be completely normal, right? Changes in our focus, feeling a little bit more scatterbrained or forgetful, but not to the point where it's impacting your day to day life. I'm careful when I speak about it though, because common is not the same thing as normal,
Hmm.
and memory issues are very common. And so it really becomes the factor of how much is it impacting your life now, and what are we at risk for later? Because, like you said, there are typical changes with age. And though they're not inevitable, we can still do things to improve upon those changes. There is a difference between what's typical and what's normal and how common that is.
Yeah, I love that you make that distinction. I make that distinction all the time, right? That look, aging is inevitable. It's got an undefeated record, but we have so much of how we age is within our control. And what I hear you saying is that memory health, there's a lot of things that we can do, lifestyle factors that are in our control to help improve or maintain our memory health. Does that sound about right?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
And while I hear you saying that it seems to be that it's fairly common that people may have some of these memory problems as they get older, it's not necessarily normal. Is that right?
Yes, nor is it inevitable because I think for
Nor
a
is it
long
inevitable.
time, yeah,
Yeah.
people thought that that was just something that happens as you get older, is that,
Yeah.
you're not as sharp, or that memory loss is a normal part of aging, and memory loss is never a normal part of aging.
Mm.
There's that distinction between memory change, which is those subtle changes, the mild forgetfulness, maybe, really having to put more effort into your focus or when you're trying to learn something new, but memory loss, where you can't recall details and they don't come back to you later, or you're struggling to keep up in conversations because, processing changes, those things are not normal as you get older.
Mm, okay. Yeah. So that would be a red flag, I suppose, as opposed to forgetting where you left your keys or walking in the room and forgetting what you went in there for. We can work on those things, but an actual permanent loss of details of some past event, that would be a red flag. Now, I was going to ask this a little later, but maybe now's a good time to dig into this since it seems to me that memory loss and things like dementia and Alzheimer's, there may be a spectrum there or continuum, or there could be some relationship. Is there, in fact, now that we're talking about kind of some red flags in memory, can you talk a little bit about memory and its relationship or not to dementia and things like Alzheimer's?
Absolutely. So you hit the nail on the head when you said there's sort of a continuum that you see when people start to have memory loss or even just those early little signs. And that really starts with a subjective memory change. So the changes that occur in the brain from Alzheimer's and dementia, that starts ages before you actually see any deficits. So that can be 10,
Mm.
20 years even. So this is why it's critical to be having these discussions even at and before age 50, right? Because what you do now will impact your memory health when you're 70, 80 years old. But really, the first sign that we start to see is called a subjective memory impairment or concern. And that's where you become aware that things are changing or feel different. So it may be harder to process information. You may have more tip of tongue experiences where the words just get stuck. That forgetfulness, difficulty with recall, even changes in your mood because of it, or increased mental fatigue, that can all happen with just a subjective memory change. It's serious enough that you see it, but the people around you don't yet notice it. When it progresses down that continuum, you end up with what's called mild cognitive impairment. And this is diagnosable by your physician, where you recognize these issues. And though they're not impacting your ability to live independently, pay your bills, do your job, it's noticeable enough to the people around you too, that you're repeating yourself more often, and that's really interrupting like the fluency in your life. Things are taking you longer, your mood is shifting, you're more tired at the end of the day, everything's a little bit more effortful, and those mishaps and memory lapses pop up more often. Mild cognitive impairment is also a window of time that's a preclinical stage for dementia. So it's not yet dementia, but it's a huge window of time that, if you change nothing, can progress to becoming dementia. And the rates of dementia are absolutely staggering.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you heard about
Yeah.
this yet?
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Yeah. But please talk about this because, yeah, I believe that, yeah, the Alzheimer's and dementia and all of this is dramatically on the rise. Is that correct?
It is. So right now, there's about 55 million people globally living with dementia. That number is expected to more than double, almost nearly triple by the year 2050. Now,
Wow.
that's not that far from now. So, these rates are absolutely staggering. So, if you don't personally know somebody affected by Alzheimer's and dementia now, it's very likely that in the future you will. And so, having these conversations about memory health and what we can be doing to improve it now, it's really critical to our cognitive health now and in the future.
Okay, so let me see if I've got this right. Our first step's going to be this subjective memory impairment. Is that what you called it?
Hmm.
And that's where maybe I'm kind of noticing things aren't quite the same and I'm having some memory difficulties. Next stage will be this mild cognitive impairment, which is actually a diagnosable thing. That's probably when family members are noticing some
Hmm.
changes in me. And then that can then, if left unchecked, lead to full-blown dementia, which, as you just mentioned, is wildly on the rise. But you had said something really interesting in there when you were talking about mild cognitive impairment. You said if steps aren't taken here, then it's almost inevitable that you are now sliding down this slide. What are those steps?
So I'm going to backtrack for just a minute to get a little
Sure.
bit clearer with it too. I wouldn't say inevitable. There are other causes of mild cognitive impairment, some of which are completely resolvable in other ways. So it could be medication mismanagement. So if somebody's
Mm-hmm.
taking something
Right.
that's not working for them, traumatic brain injury can lead to mild cognitive impairment, depression. So it really does depend on kind of what led to the mild cognitive impairment. Certain, reasons that have started that impairment can lead more to dementia than others. But either way, yes, it is a critical window of time to intervene. This is really kind of the bread and butter of what I do. I lead lunch and learns in neuro clinics about this very topic, about what we can be doing in that window of time. Because one of the biggest things I see is that people will go to their physician and they will or will not get the diagnosis right away of mild cognitive impairment or MCI. But then the physician will say something like, I'll see you in 3 months. And if nothing happens in that 3-month window, what are we expecting to change on the back end other than it potentially progressing and getting worse? And so this is really where I've started to intervene and give a lot of information to people on these lifestyle changes, because they certainly cannot hurt. They can
Right.
only help. And, if nothing changes, nothing will change.
I'm 100% with you. If nothing changes, nothing will change. Yeah, big proponent of that. So this is a perfect segue into what I really want to talk to you about, because I found you on social media and I found your content to be very compelling because we're talking a lot about the same thing, right? It's these this is, hey, the benefits of go figure, right? The benefits of healthy living are far and wide. And while I normally talk about them from a place of healthy aging and being strong, fit, vital, capable, it hadn't occurred to me that these same things would be valuable for brain health or memory health. In fact, I hadn't really thought of that at all. I hadn't put that together until I stumbled across your content. So, that being said, let's talk about some of these environmental factors. You mentioned stress, diet, exercise. Let's start with whatever you think is the most impactful or perhaps your favorite, and let's start digging into each one of these.
So I think to stay in line with your podcast, and really, if I had to give one recommendation of the one thing that somebody changed to improve their cognitive health, it would be exercise. And so it kind of goes
Right on.
hand in hand with what
Yeah.
you're saying, and it is a
Okay. Yeah.
pillar. It's one of the pillars within my coaching program, because we have a structured program that we go through, and sustenance is one of those pillars, and that's really our movement and our nutrition. But there are so many studies to really dive deep into how exercise helps the brain, not just that it does, but why. When it comes to memory, the structure that is sort of the memory region of your brain, it's called your hippocampus, that can atrophy over time. And some of that can be age related. Then there can be other factors that play into that as well. And exercise has been shown, even in people with mild cognitive impairment who already have a memory problem, to actually increase the volume of your hippocampus. And so when it comes to your brain, size matters. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
huge. So exercise, it can help you with clear thinking right now. It can help clear stress and help with your stress management. It can help your sleep. And it can help on the back end with truly like supporting your brain structures. So there's so many ways that they all come together, and exercise is really key to supporting your brain as you get older.
Now, when you say exercise, that may sound big to some people. Is there a modality or type of movement that is better for our brain health than others? For example, cardio versus strength training versus taking a walk. Is there any sort of, are you aware of any studies or anything that would lead to one modality over the other?
Yes, I always like to say, let's meet people where they are. If you're not
Yep.
moving, get moving. If that
Yeah.
means a walk, fantastic. So whatever gets you moving is key. But there are a lot of studies on the best kinds of movement and how they impact your memory health and your cognitive health. So, one is aerobic movement like walking. There are so many studies, endless studies to say that even at a minimum of, I think it was 3,800 steps, I just read this study the other day, that you can have cognitive benefits from that. So, just getting up and walking, 3,800 steps is not that much in a day, but making it intentional that you're getting out there and moving. And the closer that number got in this one study to 10,000 steps,
Mm-hmm.
the more cognitive benefit that you had from it. There's also a lot when it comes to strength training. So I've read that 150 minutes of exercise per week with intentional strength training has massive benefits.
Fantastic. All right. And for my listeners out there thinking right now, this sounds suspicious. I just now met Francine. We did not prepare this at all ahead of time because you're preaching my message, right? A little bit of cardio, walk every day. 10,000 steps is just the gold standard, but certainly that minimum of, I would say 5,000, 3,800, I think is what you mentioned in that
Mhm.
study. And some strength training, especially for those of us over 50. So that same prescription that is going to keep us healthy and vital is going to keep our, go figure, going to keep our brain healthy and vital. So I absolutely love that. Now, you had mentioned one of your pillars is sustenance, and you threw movement and nutrition in there. Is that
Mhm.
right? All
Mhm.
right. My next favorite topic to talk about is nutrition. I suppose it makes sense that what you eat absolutely has an impact on your brain health, but talk to us about that. Why would that be?
Sure. So, really, when you're talking about dementia risk, you're talking about potential plaque buildup in the brain. And we need to do everything we can to support our brain. Just like we talk about a heart healthy diet and keeping your heart without plaque buildup, the brain health is the same way. So, and the rules
Hmm.
of thumb are pretty similar for a heart healthy diet to a brain healthy diet. And I always find that kind of funny that people, if you tell them, you need to eat a heart healthy diet to reduce your risk of heart disease as you get older, it sounds in line and people are totally on board with that. And then when you say the same about brain healthy diet, people are like, "What? How does that impact my brain?" But just like heart disease happens, brain disease happens, and that brain disease looks like Alzheimer's and dementia. And so it's a huge component to maintaining a healthy brain.
Okay, so we want to avoid this plaque buildup in the brain. That may take some people by surprise. They may not have heard that. And you had mentioned that the same kind of a diet that would be good for heart health will be good for brain health. What types of things are we either selecting or avoiding then for this optimal brain health in our diet?
Sure. So we'll start with what we should avoid. And I don't think any of this would be surprising, but highly processed foods.
Mm-hmm.
Those, they don't lend well to any kind of health for your body. And then also a lot of meat. You may or may not have heard the debate on meat or no meat, but I think too much red meat is a big one as well. And paying attention to the quality of our foods. the quality of our meat? Are there a lot of added hormones and
Mm.
additives? Is it kind of processed like the rest of the highly processed food, or are we getting high quality sources of protein, organic or locally sourced? When it comes to what we do want to eat, there's a lot of foods that are neuroprotective. One of the best ways is to pay attention to the fruits and vegetables in your diet and to try to get a rainbow assortment of fruits and vegetables in. Pay attention to the colors, try different varieties. Different fruits and vegetables have different benefits to them. So the more you're exposing yourself to, the better. I can list a couple of the really like high quality sources that have been shown to be most neuroprotective, and those are spinach or dark leafy greens, blueberries, almonds or other nuts, olive oil, broccoli,
Yeah, those
eggs.
cruciferous vegetables, eggs, yeah.
Hmm.
It's nature's superfood there.
Yep,
So,
avocados.
yeah, so you've mentioned a couple of the nuts, the avocados, maybe even eggs. So, there is a role for fats, healthy fats, right?
Oh,
In
absolutely.
brain health, is that right?
Yep. Your
Yeah.
brain loves fat, actually.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I think that might surprise some folks that, 'cause, especially my generation, we grew up in that whole fat is bad sort of thing where, we were encouraged the base of our pyramid was, I think, 8 to 10 helpings of grains and cereals per day, and then way at the top was was butter because it was evil, saturated fat. So yeah, the avocados, the nuts, the olive oils, the eggs you mentioned, and then of course eating that rainbow, which is just standard advice from all of your nutrition folks are going to advise that, and there's good reason for that, right?
Mhm.
Just choose that you're selecting all these different, this wide variety, I suppose, of phytochemicals, vitamins, minerals, things of that nature. Now, Francine, do you recommend or do you feel like there are supplements that are key for brain health that you would either recommend or suggest people look into?
Sure. So these really get highly personalized, and I always
Yeah.
recommend speaking with your physician and testing too to see, where you're deficient. But I'll talk about a couple of the key ones that have been highly linked to our memory health. So vitamin D deficiency is a huge one, and you
Mm.
can get that from the sun. You can also get it from a supplement and from foods. Really, having those wide variety of foods, or you're going to get a variety of vitamins and minerals. The other one is B12. There's a lot of studies that talk about B12 deficiency being linked to cognitive decline and magnesium. Those are the three that I hear about the most, that I read about the most, that the big names talk about the most. But again, so highly personalized and should definitely be a discussion with somebody's physician.
Yeah, I suppose really when it comes to supplementation, there's very few, if any, across the board supplements, right? It's best always to test to see if where you are and whether you're deficient before you start supplementing. But I thought that would be an interesting add-on to our, as long as we're talking about nutrition, some things that people might think about. If they're deficient in these things that might impact their cognitive abilities. Alrighty, so you had mentioned that sustenance was one of your pillars. I was going to go to sleep and stress next. What do you have? What's next pillar wise for you?
So that's one of the pillars. It's
That's
stability is that pillar. So there's four
stability. Okay.
pillars within the Mind Your Memory Blueprint program, and they are sustenance, systems, strategies, and stability. And I think this is what sets this program apart from others that I've seen. There's not many programs out there showing people how to care for their memory, which is a huge issue because, as we talked about, with memory decline and staggering rates of dementia, we really need to be paying attention to this because nobody comes to save you if your memory starts to really become a problem. And the best thing we can do is focus on preventative and strategies. And a lot of the bigger names out there that have programs out, I think that they fail to meet people where they are in a certain way because they tout a lot of these studies and they give a lot of very dense information. And that's really tricky for people to put into play. And so, one of the basis, like entry points of my program, are memory strategies. And I think, again, this is where a lot of programs leave this part out is how can we support your memory right now? What strategies can we put in place to support your memory today, tomorrow, the next day? What environmental changes are going to make the biggest impact for you? What external memory supports can we put into place? Then we can start talking about these other pillars, because if you're struggling with your memory, which can feel like an uphill battle on your own, and now you're expected to make 12 different lifestyle changes, it's just
Yeah.
hard to reach that level where it's going to be approachable or sustainable. And that's a huge focus within this program.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and B, I absolutely love that because clearly I think why most, let's take for example New Year's resolutions. The reasons most of them fail is because somebody who's been very sedentary, has not seen a salad in months, says, okay, that's it. I'm just eating salads. I'm hitting the gym 5 days a week. Let's go. And they're good for the first 2 or 3 weeks. And those gym goers all know what happens in in January. The gym's packed. In February, it's right back to normal. And it's probably because people just bit off way more. If you're not eating any salads, maybe start with one a week and then
Mhm.
maybe work your way to, okay, well, I don't like this. I do like that. Okay, maybe I'll work up to two a week. So you're saying these small steps are meeting people where they are the keys to long-term success. That's what I hear you saying. Absolutely love that. So we've got 4 pillars. We talked about sustenance. You mentioned, I think it was system, strategy, and stability, right?
Mhm.
Let's pick another one and talk about that. So what is your second pillar?
Well, so the pillars go in order depending on each individual person. It's a
Right.
highly personalized program, so they don't go in any specific
Okay.
order. But we did talk about sustenance and we talked about systems and strategies a little bit. So let's move on to stability. And that's where
Mm-hmm.
we talk a lot about sleep and stress.
Okay, so sleep and stress. So it turns out that both of these things, getting adequate sleep and having some sort of stress management, are keys to overall health and vitality, right?
Mhm.
So it only makes sense that they would also have a huge impact on brain health and memory health. So let's start with sleep, one of my favorite subjects. What does the science say to us about sleep and memory health?
So, having inadequate sleep can actually increase your risk of dementia. There are so many studies that talk about this. There are a lot of processes that occur when you're sleeping that actually help you consolidate your memory and protect your memory. And during the sleep cycle, there's a lot of research talking about how that plaque buildup that we've talked about that can lead to Alzheimer's and dementia, there's sort of like a little wash cycle that happens in your brain at night, so long as you're getting 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep. So there are so many reasons that sleep supports your memory, and not just the next day, because we all know what it feels like when you haven't
Hmm.
slept. Functionally, you're not the same person the next day. And so, years and years of insomnia or difficulty sleeping or sleep apnea can actually really hurt your memory and cognitive health as you get older.
And so, if I'm not mistaken, then it's the REM cycles where we're doing that primarily that deep memory consolidation work. Is that correct?
It's during the deep sleep cycles. Yep.
The deep sleep cycle. Okay.
Hmm.
And so folks probably are familiar. You have these cycles of sleep. You have these REM and deep sleep, and you're going to go through several cycles of that a night. And that's really what determines whether sleep is healthy or not, right? A, it's getting that quantity that you mentioned, 7 to 9 hours. 8 hours is still pretty much the gold standard. And it's then the quality is getting those cycles. And those of us that are I wear a Whoop band, but there's a number of devices now that will measure this. There's the Apple Watches and Fitbits and Whoops and Aura rings and things like
Hmm.
that are giving us some valuable, there you go, giving us some valuable feedback on the quality of our sleep. Now, that being said, sleep is so important for our brain health, for our memory health. What are some of your best tips for folks that are struggling with sleep and just looking to improve their overall quality of sleep?
Sure. So, I'm actually going to tell you my favorite, which is you may or may not have heard of it, but it's one that I've implemented in my own life that has made a huge difference for me because I have struggled with insomnia my entire life.
Mm.
And it's stepping outside and getting that morning light first thing in the morning. It like resets your rhythm, if you will, your internal clock, and it makes a huge difference in that cycle for the rest of the day and then when you go to sleep. And so there are so many things that are, you know, so easy to implement. Stepping outside and just getting 10 minutes of natural light in the morning can help keeping a good exercise regimen can help so that you can rest at night, and timing it well. Not trying to exercise an hour before you try to go to sleep, because it can amp you up. But there's so many different lifestyle hacks we can try to improve our sleep. And then, of course, seeking treatment if you really struggle. If you've tried all the natural things and you've gone down that road and you still struggle to sleep at night, there's no shame in accepting help and mentioning it to your physician and really working to see what else can we do, because not sleeping has such negative impacts that you don't want to allow that to continue.
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you there. And I love that your first tip is getting morning light. When I tell people that, sometimes they're, well, now wait, I'm talking about going to sleep. But you're right. It sets that circadian rhythm. And that natural rhythm is cortisol high in the morning and low at night, and melatonin low at night and high in the evening. And one of the best ways to ensure that natural rhythm is to get outside, get exposed to light. I'm personally a big fan of, that's a great time to start getting some of those steps in, right? If you're going to shoot for 10,000 steps a day, that's a great time to go out and get 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes worth of those steps in that morning. Get some of that morning light will really have an impact over time on your sleep. All right, what about stress? How does stress impact our memory health?
So, stress has negative impacts on your physical and cognitive health. As we know, long term chronic stress can actually lead to more inflammation in the body. And that inflammation doesn't help anything. It doesn't help
Mm.
your heart, it doesn't help your brain, it doesn't help your stress levels and your mood, your anxiety, right? So, it's kind of this like cycle that if you don't intervene with some stress management strategies, it can affect you mentally, and it can affect you physically.
Yeah, 100%. We talk a lot about stress and stress management on this show. Certainly not having, because I think the problem is that our stress response is a biological evolutionary response to danger or
Mhm.
intense situations, right? And for that, it's fantastic. But most of us don't face physical danger day to day, hopefully, right? So instead, our stresses are work stress or traffic stress or family stress or relation stress, all these different things, but they're additive, right?
Mhm.
And as we move into this space of chronic stress, like you said, we start seeing all this inflammation, all these unhealthy biological markers, and of course, not to mention all the emotional and mental damage that does as well. It's pretty easy to see how that could impact brain health, memory health, as well as just your overall physical health. All right, so we talked about diet, we talked about exercise, sleep, we talked about stress and stress management and importance there. What else should we know in terms of lifestyle factors that we want to really get dialed in order to optimize our memory health?
It's really important to know where you are in the moment and to have a level of self awareness, right? So, just as you said, I've noticed that when I walk into a room, sometimes I feel more forgetful. And that's really where I always say we need to start with people, is to really get in touch with yourself, and from a place of curiosity without judgment, start paying attention to what it looks like for you, what memory concerns you may have right now in the moment, but also down the road. I think a lot of people harbor a lot of fear about losing their memory as they get older. Maybe they've had a loved one that they've seen with dementia have that happen to them. And so it's just really important to have a level of self awareness and to be mindful and to self monitor over time and to start really paying attention and being honest with yourself. Are there things in my lifestyle that I know I could offer myself more support?
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, that's self-care, self-love, practice. Absolutely, big fan of that. Well, Francine, as we're wrapping up here, what's next for you? What's on the horizon?
I'm going to keep coaching. I'm going to keep dismantling that myth that memory loss is just an inevitable part of aging and that there's nothing we can do about it. And I'm going to keep living in this mission and sharing this information, putting out valuable resources to people, and taking on clients who want to make that change in their own lives.
I absolutely love that. I have a similar mission, right? I'm railing against the common narrative of aging, that it's all downhill from here, that with muscle loss and beer bellies and all of it are just inevitable, and aches and pains, and that we can't live our healthiest, most vital life. And you're similarly saying, hey, you don't have to live with memory loss. It's not an inevitable part it's not a part of healthy aging at all. So I'm really glad I stumbled across you. Now, people that are listening to this and thinking, I could use some help in this area, how can they connect with you?
Sure. So on my website, francinewaskavitz.com, I have a lot of free resources, like I had said, those blog articles. And then I have a free guide. It's the Get Your Memory Back Starter Guide. It's my 4-step formula to go from forgetful to focused. And they can download that guide. I also offer a free coaching call where we can really identify what their concerns are, their unique risks, help really break down any barriers that are holding them back from clear thinking, and then talk about coaching and the clear path that we can create to go from memory concerned to memory confident.
Memory concerned and memory confident. I absolutely love it. All right, folks, I'll drop all of that information into the show notes so you guys can find that there. You can check Francine out at Francine Waskavitz, Waskavitz.com. That's Francine Waskavitz. Again, I'll drop that into the show notes. So, Francine, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom and your passion with us. I encourage you to keep up your great work and wish you all the best in all your future endeavors.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Okay, folks, that's our show for this week. If you've enjoyed this podcast, I want to let you know that we have other free resources over at silveredgefree.com. There you'll find our free guides with our top tips on nutrition, exercise, and healthy lifestyle, as well as a couple of new assessments. So feel free to head over there and download anything that looks useful to you in your health and wellness journey. I also want to let you know that you can find all the links to the resources we discussed in this episode over at silveredgefitness.com/episode 145. And you can continue the conversation over there as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments on today's show. I really appreciate you spending your time with me today. And until next time, stay strong. Again, that's silveredgepartners.com and use coupon code SILVEREDGE use coupon code SILVEREDGE. That's SILVEREDGE all run together with no spaces at checkout. Blah, 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 blah.